10 years ago, sitting in this exact parking spot, waiting to go into this bar to meet some friends, I had an idea for a comic dropped fully formed into my lap. It was about a werewolf named Lupe who owned a food truck and got his dream job being the head chef at a restaurant. But he quickly learned dream jobs can turn into nightmares. The next day I sat down at this dining room table and started drawing the story. It took a couple of months, and by the time it was done, it was 90 pages worth of story. I published it online for a few of my friends to read, and that was pretty much the end of it, I thought. Over the next couple of years, my life went through some serious changes, and when I looked back at those changes, I realized they lined up with things that happened to the main character of my story. I tried a lot of different ways to explain this away, but the answer that I landed on was that it was what Grant Morrison described as a hypersigil. I've spent a lot of time since then really unpacking what a hypersigil is, and that's kind of what this channel is about. But specifically in this video, I want to tell you that this isn't the end of the story. I found that my unconscious created in Lupe a very good model for me and my reality. And so I've started imagining what other changes might I be able to create in my life using Lupe as the basis of a hypersigil. So over the past few months, I've been creating more stories with Lupe, not in a 90-page format, but in kind of a daily comic strip format, because that seemed easier to tackle. And it allowed me to kind of say, what are the things I want to try and create hypersigils to influence, and then be able to tackle more than one at once, and then not have to spend all my time focusing on one big change. Now, the first one happened very unintentionally, and so I'm experimenting to see what happens when I try to do this intentionally. And so far, I've had some positive results and some not so positive results. And I'd love for you guys to kind of share in this journey with me. And so don't let the word Patreon scare you, but I have a Patreon where I'm uploading these comics, and you can go there and read them for absolutely free. They are there to be read and experienced by whoever wants to, free of charge. But there are levels to this Patreon. And so if you want to go beyond just reading the comics and find out from me firsthand what they were meant to manifest and whether they're working or not working, then there's another level of the Patreon where you can join and find out that information. There's a second paid option on my Patreon that bears explaining, mostly based on the name. It's the not safe for work-ish tier. I'm not becoming a pornographer. This is not the OnlyFans of my comics. In my original hypersigil, Lupe had a girlfriend, Hazel, and in these new hypersigils that I'm creating, they're married. Originally, when I did stories about Lupe and Hazel, I saw the potential that, okay, well, these could potentially affect my wife and I's reality. They can kind of be models for our relationship. And I think that's a possibility, but it's gone deeper than that for me. It's gone in kind of a Jungian direction. A lot of times, the people that we're drawn to that represent the opposite pole from us, I'm trying to avoid specific gender language here, people who have what amounts to our opposite natures represent an opportunity to become whole. So in that sense, for me, the feminine of my wife isn't just my wife. Hazel doesn't just represent my wife, but she represents this opposite pole from me. She represents an opportunity to embrace wholeness. So in that sense, stories with Hazel and Lupe represent me interacting with my soul, my completeness, my connection to divine reality, or what you could call God or the universe or whatever you want to. So those stories have become really powerful because they represent in some ways what magic considers the great work, becoming one with reconnecting to God, reconnecting to the universe, becoming what you were meant to be from the very beginning. And so some of these stories take on a flavor of what I want my relationship with the greater universe and divinity to be. I want it to be playful. I want it to be intimate. And so sometimes the best metaphors for that relationship are sexual metaphors. And so like I said, I'm not becoming a pornographer. These stories that, even though I've labeled them not safe for work, they're tasteful, I believe. Yes, there is nudity. Yes, there is implied sex, but I'm not showing you everything. Think of this as a rated R movie, not a porn movie. So, but I also recognize that some people who may find these comics don't want to be surprised by that content. So that's why I'm putting that at another tier than just the commentary tier. So that's what not safe for work-ish means, in case you're worried about that, or worried that maybe I'm creating something that you weren't expecting or aren't interested in. But if you are interested in it, and I assume many of you will be, then that's there. And I will explain what those comics were meant to manifest and how effective they've been. Some of them have already been effective, and I'm excited to share those stories with people too. So anyway, there's the sequel to Monster Truck. It's not a 90-page graphic novel. It's a series of short comic strips in the style of newspaper comic strips. And you can tell if you look at my art style, I'm really taking a lot from Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes, which I think anybody in this modern era who does comic strips really kind of leans on Bill Watterson a lot. I also are really heavily inspired by a comic book artist named Brandon Graham. And so right now I'm trying to find my style in a synthesis of Graham's and Watterson's. But I'm really enjoying working on these. I try to work on them every day. The mornings that I can get up early, have a cup of coffee and work on them are my best days. Those are the days that I really love how those days start. But I'm also very busy working at the factory, driving Uber, just making sure my family has what it needs, and also trying to create a better reality for my family, not just through those jobs, but through these hypersigils, which, as I've already explained, I don't believe change the outside world, but instead change my internal world so that I can better change my outside world. That's magic to me. That's how it works, and that's how these hypersigils work. And if you've been enjoying these videos and following along, I'm super excited about that. So there's more to come. I've got a lot to say and think about this topic.